For those that are new here, the reason we're called Step 7 is because we have 7 basic steps that we attempt to bring people through. We've been going through these steps this year along with the values. And today we're going to be talking about what we call our 3rd step. And I'm going to simply read it to you. Our step 3 says, we considered accepting Jesus Christ as our higher power. Now that term higher power, I don't know of another topic that has more hollow, deceptive philosophies wrapped around it, or basic traditions of this world, than when you get into the topic of higher power. And that's why I am so glad that we at Step 7 here have gone through and stripped away all the hollow philosophies, stripped away all the human traditions that surround it, and have simply based our community, our program, and our recovery on Jesus Christ. Amen. Let's go ahead and pray. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you for this opportunity to share. Lord, I want to thank you for the teaching you have given me this week around this topic. And Lord, I just pray that you would speak through me, that Lord, you would open hearts to hear, and that Lord, your presence would fill this room. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Our step 3 not only sets us apart from the vast majority of recovery entities that are out there, but it also holds a couple of distinctions here within the community, okay? The first distinction I wanted to point out is that we consider step 3 the tipping point in a person's life of recovery, okay? Now, in case you don't know what the term means, it's actually a business term. Tipping point refers to the moment, the action, or the event whereby the balance between effort and reward slowly begins to move in the business's favor, okay? To put it into our lives, it's that moment in time where the effort becomes easier and the rewards become greater. Every week, we hear of folks in this room who have had jobs, better jobs, relationships restored, driver's licenses given, good things. And yet if you were to sit down and talk with them over potluck, they would tell you that all they simply did was give their life to Christ, begin to model their life after his teachings, and suddenly everything began to work out for them. It's almost like coincidence happened here, okay, folks? Basic traditions of man is that I've got to work. I've got to really bear down. I've got to do this myself. And yet we find when we give our life to Christ and we allow him to rule within our lives according to the principles that he's taught us, the life suddenly becomes a whole lot easier and the rewards suddenly become a whole lot greater. Now, folks, this message isn't just for folks who have struggled with drugs and alcohol, okay? Because we've all struggled at some point in our life with the need for a higher power. In fact, most of the conversations I have with folks around higher power is not trying to convince them that they need Jesus as that higher power. It's the fact that they need a higher power in their life to begin with. Because it is a very close-held human tradition that I should be able to handle this, given the skills, the ability, and the moxie that I have on board right now. And yet, I will give you an example that clearly illustrates why this is not the case. You're cruising down your favorite furniture store, and you spy a piece of furniture that you absolutely love. In fact, you see it already set up in the room, taking a part of the wall that you want it to sit at. You bring the sales clerk over and you tell them, I want this piece right here to go into my home. They tell you, I'll meet you up front, go ahead and pay the cashier. And so you go up there, you pay the cashier, and the little sales clerk comes around the corner with a box. This box is about this tall, it's about this wide, and it's only this thick, folks. And yet emblazoned on the side of it is the perfect piece of furniture that you just picked out. And you see it yet again, yet underneath it this time are some words that are written in several different languages so that everyone can understand. Some assembly is required. Okay? What do? We take that home, we open one end of it, we upend it onto the floor in the room where we're going to place it, and we begin to sort the pieces for ease of assembly later on. We then take the box and we tilt it up against another piece of furniture in the room so that we have the vision right before us of what we're going for here, okay? We then take a look at the tool list that is recommended to put this piece together. Now, on the way to the toolbox, we've already forgotten half of them, so we just get the first 3 tools that are needed. And we decide that because of our skills and ability and our moxie, we probably don't need the rest of them anyway, so we just get the 3 that we remember, and we come back and we begin to assemble it using only the vision set before us here, okay? The next hour is spent making faces that look something along the lines of this. Yeah, that's close enough. At the end of that hour, you have taken apart and put together the piece of furniture no less than 3 times. You have had to make 2 runs back to your toolbox because it turns out you did need the rest of those tools, and you've had to make 1 emergency run to Home Depot because they gave you inferior parts that could not be put together and taken apart so many times here. And yet, as you stare at the piece of furniture that you have created and you compare it to the piece of furniture that you were going for, it can only best be described as an abstract artist rendition of what the piece was supposed to look like here, okay? And so you're frustrated and you're upset and you're considering that you're going to have to tear this all the way down and come all the way back up yet again. And lo and behold, God has placed a person in your life, a helpmate, if you will, who simply comes alongside with a little booklet in her hand and says, "Sweetie, why don't we try putting it together one more time, but let's use the maker's instructions on how to do this." Suddenly, everything begins to make sense, okay? It's a beautiful illustration, and we've all had it happen within our lives. The basic need for a book of instruction, okay? If only there were something for our lives that equated to that book of instruction that we might be able to look at. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of the vision board, okay? I believe every person should have a board filled with a pictorial image of what it is that you're ultimately trying to achieve here, okay? And yet a vision board in and of itself cannot give you the specific details of how this life is going to go together. You must, folks, have an instruction book. And this instruction book is based solely on the teachings and the life of Jesus Christ. Amen. The second part that sets step 3 apart from all the others is that it is the first of 3 steps that I cannot do simply one time or for even a short period of time and then be done with. Every morning as I'm laying there in bed and my feet are about to hit the floor, I have to consider who's going to be in charge of little Tommy today. Is it going to be little Tommy? Is it going to be the world that little Tommy interacts with? Or is it going to be Jesus Christ? And folks, that decision that I make ultimately decides whether this is another day of laying the framework for long-term, sustainable sobriety and recovery, or whether I'm starting to lay the framework and the groundwork for my next relapse. Because we see from time to time folks who come to us, and yet their recovery looks nothing more than a seemingly endless series of relapses. They have a whole drawer full of 30-day chips, but they got nothing beyond that. Those folks have yet to consider the importance of having a higher power at work within their life. And occasionally we will run across folks who have a whole drawer full of 90-day chips, and yet they've got no 6-month chip to go with it. Because they put a term limit on their higher power. What they did was they said, you know what, Jesus, I need you as my higher power. I got 30 days here in this treatment facility, so at the end of that, day 31, you're done. I'll throw a 20 in the offering plate for your trouble, and then I've got it. Or I've got a need for a higher power, but only until the part where my family is restored, my business is back, whatever it is. And at that point, once the tipping point occurs and the rewards begin to roll in, I'm going to take back over. And folks, your higher power has no term limit. And I must every day make a decision and consider carefully who is going to be the higher power here today. I struggled a little bit this week trying to figure out which illustration I wanted to use, because the Bible was chock full of ordinary, workaday, wouldn't give them a second glance people, and yet they did incredibly extraordinary things simply because they turned their life over to Christ and allowed Him to lead them to the next right thing. And yet, because of the season that we find ourselves in, I decided to pull a page out of Jesus' life, a point in time where He had multiple choices to make as to who the higher power was going to be within His life, hoping that we can pull some little nuggets of truth out of there that might help us in our life here today. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and turn in your Bibles back to the left, go to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 26. Matthew, chapter 26. Somebody with one of the black Bibles, holler out the page number when you get there. 695, somewhere around there. Matthew, chapter 26. Really, that big of a difference? Matthew, chapter 26. Kind of toward the end of Matthew. While everybody is finding their way, let me go ahead and set the stage for you here, okay? The Last Supper has been consumed. John records that it was a very heavy, weighty, solemn kind of a meal, filled with a lot of teaching from Jesus. He was trying to get across to the disciples what was about to happen so that they would be prepared. And yet, they end the meal and they go to a very familiar place to all of them. It's a little garden area, not terribly far away. It's a place where Jesus has taken them many times in the past to have a little small group interaction with them. I'm going to begin reading in Matthew 26 in verse 36. It says, Then Jesus went with His disciples to a place called Gethsemane. And He said to them, Sit here while I go over there and pray. He took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee along with him and began to be sorrowful and greatly troubled. Then He said to them, My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. Going a little further, He fell with His face to the ground and prayed, My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as You will. They've gone to this place many times, as I said. They hit the clearing. Everybody's got their favorite bench, their favorite rock, their favorite stump that they sit on. It's just like small group. It's always hilarious because we'll have new folks come into small group every once in a while and they sit in somebody else's chair. And then that person shows up and they're suddenly like, well, where do I sit? And they have to go find something new. Everybody settles in. And yet Jesus doesn't begin a series of teaching with them or leading them in a little small group exercise. He instead says, I want you to pray. And then He says, Peter, James, John, on my six. And He walks what Mark describes as only a stone's throw away. Probably no more me to Miss Carol, okay? He tells the three, His closest friends. He says, I'm in trouble, guys. This is the biggest battle that I've faced so far here. Because see, I am 100% God, but I'm 100% man at the same time. And those two are at war with each other now like they have never been before. And He says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to keep watch with me. Okay? Now, that means fully alert, ready to go. everything locked on, okay? I want you to watch with me while I try to resolve this within myself. He then goes just a few steps beyond there, probably Jim, and he face plants onto the ground. And he says, Matthew records, my Father. Luke records, Abba, is what he says. Daddy, I don't want to do this. I can see the vision board ahead of me that he so eloquently describes to the Pharisees just a few hours from now, where he says, oh, you're going to see me again, but this time I'm going to be sitting at the right hand of God. He sees the vision of where he's going to be, and yet he knows all the assembly that's required to get there. And he says, it's overwhelming, it's too much for me, and if there's any way that this can pass from me, then let's do it. If there's an easy button, I'd like to see it now, okay? And yet he ends it with not what I want, not the way I want to do this, but the way that you want to do this. It's a beautiful prayer, and if you have Jesus as your higher power, it is a prayer you need to memorize because it's going to come flowing out of your mouth at some point in time. Daddy, Father God, I don't want to do this. This road seems hard. This seems difficult. This is not easy. And yet I must remember the last few words because that's where the strength comes. I don't want to do it my way. I want to do it according to what the Maker intended so that my life is assembled the exact way it needs to be. Amen. Now Jesus spends about an hour praying similar prayers to this. And at the end of that hour, he gets up, shakes the leaves off of his garment, and goes and checks on the boys here, okay? Let's continue reading. Verse 40. Then he returned to the disciples, but found them sleeping. Could you men not keep watch with me for 1 hour? He asked Peter. Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, the body is weak. Jesus throws some serious shade on the Peter here. In order to understand it, you got to understand the backstory here, okay? Not terribly long ago, Peter confesses Jesus as the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus tells him, good, keep that in mind because the Son of Man is about to go to Jerusalem. Wicked men are going to turn him over to the authorities, and the authorities are going to kill him. And before he can get out, and 3 days later I'm going to walk out of the grave, Peter stops him and says, hang on, boss. No need for all that to happen. Tell you what, little buddy, whenever we get to Jerusalem, you just get behind me here, okay? And I'll go through and handle anything that needs to be handled, okay? Jesus calls him Satan. That's how you know you have a deep relationship with somebody, when you get away with calling them Satan to their face. And it's still okay. Not 3 hours earlier, sitting around the table, Peter loudly proclaims to everyone in the room that he understands that the little bitty fellas are probably going to run whenever it starts getting bad. Okay? He can see the weak needing to run away, but not him. In fact, Jesus, I'm going to go with you all the way. If we're going to prison, I'm going to be your cellie. If we're going to death, I'm going to be the last thing you see on this side. I'm going to ride or die kind of guy, Jesus. That's who I am, and that's what I'm going to do. And that's why Jesus, who never added or took away a word from anything he said, couldn't you men, because you're a man, right? You're a ride or die kind of man, right? Stay awake for 1 hour? I mean, how simple is that? Keep watch, pray. Sort the pieces, get all the tools together. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Peter. I resemble Peter quite a bit. Peter does incredible things for God. I'm going to say well over 10,000 people came to know Christ as their personal Savior because of the teachings of Peter. And yet Peter had to learn to follow simple instructions in the beginning and begin to put his life in order according to what the Maker had to say about it, and not the way that he saw it. Because Peter saw he and Jesus being the same, working and going into all of these areas and preaching the gospel boldly. And that happened, but not the way Peter thought it was going to happen. And so he tells Peter, he says, you know what? Your spirit is willing. It's the flesh that keeps getting you in trouble. So many of us know that. You know, I love our opening statement because we say that while we do attract folks who this is their first time attempting sobriety, most of us that come to Step 7 have what we call a long history or struggle with these challenges. Okay? My beautiful wife will tell you that several times, more than she could probably count, I went to her and said, you know what? I'm done with drinking. I got a plan. I got it all figured out. Not a problem. This is never going to be an issue with me again. And folks, that was my spirit man talking. Because my spirit was willing to be led. But I also got a body. And my flesh was weak time after time after time. It wasn't until I decided to place a higher power within my life and let that spirit man be led by Jesus and put the flesh under the spirit man and order my life that it became lasting and sustainable sobriety. Amen. Jesus continues on. Let's go ahead and begin reading here in 42. He went away a second time and prayed, my Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken, unless I drink it, may your will be done. Notice the prayer's changed a little bit. The prayer becomes, I don't want to do this, to, you know what? I'm okay with doing this. If this is the way it's got to be, then let's go ahead and do so. Because see, Jesus was intimately aware of the passages in Psalms and in Isaiah of what exactly lay ahead of him. And he's laying it all out there and he's saying, you know what? I'm going to walk this path because I know it's your will and I understand how it's going to get me to where I ultimately want to go. He spends probably another hour or so out there praying. Gets up, dusts the leaves off, and decides to go check on the boys. Let's continue reading. 43, he came back and found them again sleeping because their eyes were heavy. So he left and went away once more, praying the third time, saying the same things. Something woke Matthew up, evidently, because he's the one that has the account that there's a second time that Jesus comes and he finds everybody sleeping. I have a feeling it was Jesus walked up, saw everybody, sawing logs again. Sounded like 11 Kevins going off at the same time. And well, Kevin enjoys his sleep, okay? And yet, he doesn't say anything. He just simply turns around and walks away. And I think he's muttering under his breath, and that's what woke Matthew up. Oh, thanks, Dad. You said you were going to send special men to me. I was thinking forces. Evidently, you were thinking Ed. So, some of y'all will get that in a bit. He walks away, and he goes back and he prays the third time. And Matthew hears him repeating the same prayers again. He is putting that flesh man down so that the spirit man can lead out under the authority of his Father. He comes back a third time. 45, when he returned to the disciples, he said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? The hour is near, and the Son of Man is now betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer. He walks back, wakes him up, gives them the New Testament equivalent to the military command. We are now at H-hour D-Day. Jump commences on solid green, okay? It's time to go. It's time for execution. All the prep work is now complete. You've got no other time. You've got to be moving. And Judas and a bunch of soldiers walk into the clearing. That's always been their little home away from home. Folks, I love that we have Jesus as our higher power. Our opening statement continues saying, While some of us might be seeking help for the first time, many of us have a long history of struggling with these challenges. Lack of a higher power is the fault of a continued struggle with these challenges. Aware of this need for help and knowing that the help needed to come from outside ourselves, we considered the importance of a higher power. It finally dawned on us that we were tired of putting the piece of furniture together time after time after time. And we began to read the instruction book. Believing that our choice in that higher power was absolutely critical to our success, we decided to consider Jesus as that power. Amen. If you want what we have, lasting, sustainable, enjoyable sobriety, then here are the steps that we recommend. That's how it finishes out. Step 1 is to recognize that your life has become a prison. That takes scant seconds just to clear a view of the wreckage that is your life at that particular point. Step 2 is to own a little bit of that. It was my fault that I'm here. And step 3 is the beginning of doing something about that. And the first thing to do is to put a boss in charge, capable of handling placing your spirit man under it and your flesh man under your spirit. This week, we have the opportunity to celebrate several different. We have Holy Thursday coming up. A lot of churches have Good Friday. Easter Sunday, huge celebration when Christ walked out of the grave and went to go sit at the right hand of God. His vision board complete. But folks, there was assembly required to get there, just like there is in our life. I pray that you all have a vision board, that you all see clearly the bright and incredible future that lays ahead of you, and that you stare at it each and every day. But I'll tell you, folks, it in and of itself can't give you the specific details of the book of instruction. It can. It will lead you how to go about putting your life in order so that 30, 60, 90, 6-month year chips, they all go by. And you continue on because it's lasting and sustainable, because it's not built on any hollow tradition. It's not built on any empty philosophy. It's simply built on a relationship with Christ. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Amen. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you again for this opportunity. Lord, I just pray that you would call to remembrance portions of this teaching. That, Lord, you would cause us to daily consider you as our higher power. And that, Lord, you would keep us until we come back together again. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.